Transitioning from the NIL question we just got to a super chat question coming in from Roger Smith. My question would be, there was a definite hierarchy to college football pre-NIL. Okay, I would expect because of what determined that hierarchy, that would generally stay in the same order because there were reasons why those schools dominated before, and they should be able to continue to do so even in the new world. However, there would be instances where some programs could elevate and others decline based on their inability to keep up. I know the indicators are very, very in the early stages, but is there any thought about whether Ohio State's in amazing position or just kind of towing the line, or are trying to catch up with where they should be regarding this whole new world?
Well, there's towing the line. The problem is that every program sees the line differently, and so they're towing different lines. And Ohio State doesn't want to be doing something that is going to get them in trouble down the road, whereas other programs, that's not necessarily the concern, because the rules as they are right now, you can find loopholes, you can push the boundaries, and the NCAA is looking out for it right now. But I think Ohio State is doing just fine. You look at the Midwest programs, the only program being talked about in terms of NIL, I think, is Ohio State. And so that's kind of been, now Notre Dame gets into the playoff picture every now and again, but like Ohio State's footing hasn't slipped, I don't think, at all in the national picture. The SEC is still going to combat with itself. Ohio State will combat with the Midwest, and nobody's really challenging them NIL-wise. You have Michigan talking, what did Jim Harbaugh say? It's not a transactional experience. It's not transcendental, but they're not looking
transformational,
yes,
I believe is the word.
They're not looking. Yeah, exactly. So, and you go back to a year or two ago, James Franklin said they're not really going to get into the NIL stuff and recruiting. And so if you don't want to do that, that's fine, but it may put you behind the times while the times are like this. It may not always be like this. I don't expect it to always be like this. It shouldn't always be like this, but I think Ohio State is fine. Now where you'll have concerns is compared to how everybody else is operating, how the operating is going at USC, or how the operating is going in the Texas schools or in the SEC. And really that's where the competition is. That's what Ohio State should be comparing itself to, but they don't necessarily want to do anything that's going to jeopardize. And that's just top down, not wanting to get anybody, not wanting to push boundaries that are going to have to be, that are later going to be found out to be rules broken.
I've done a couple of radio shows here recently. I was on Big Ten, Sirius XM. I think it's channel 372 the other day with Ben Hartsock and their host. And we kind of delved into NIL a little bit. And this, I mean, from a 5 mile up in the air viewpoint, for starters, we know who the upper echelon of college football has been and will continue to be, theoretically: Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, LSU, to an extent, a small extent. That was maybe more of a blip than being considered upper echelon. And then Oklahoma has been a consistent playoff team out of the Big 12, and maybe one or two other programs are kind of on the periphery. I think what's interesting now is who is going to jump up as a result of NIL inducements to get freshmen into college, which it looks like Texas A&M has taken the early lead in the clubhouse on that. And USC is probably not too far behind with their inducements for transfers and whatever. And can a couple of schools like them or somebody else make some inroads to where they crash that top 5 or 6, 7 program hierarchy, and who in that top 5 or 6 or 7 falls out of that group because they got left behind on NIL. And it's going to be a few years till we have the answers to those questions. Certainly those programs at the top don't want to fall out of that group and be considered by the committee as, you must put this team in the playoff every year because they're in the playoff every year type programs. So to me, we're going to come to a solution on this problem as an industry once the conferences and these leading programs come together with some kind of common ground on what is legal and what is not legal. And until that day comes, it's still going to be the Wild West. And people will vilify the NCAA. Oh, it's a bureaucracy. The guys in Indiana are dictating policy and whatever. It's not like that. It's the Power Five took the control of the NCAA back from the Hirams and all those small schools, Mount Union and whoever, and even Ohio University and, of that ilk. And they control it. They drive it. They run it now. And it's on them to set the agenda and have the Blue Ribbon Committee that sits down and says, yes, your boosters may contact these kids on the very first day they arrive on campus on June 5th, when they arrive for summer conditioning or summer quarter, freshman year, or in January if they early enroll for winter quarter or winter semester. That's the day. Have at it. You can stick your tongs into them. But what we saw with Texas A&M was it was being done obviously before the signing day back, prior to December. So that's how they got those kids theoretically. That's what Nick Saban has alleged, and that's not what this was intended to be. And, what the truth is and what the supposition is, we don't know, but they got to come to grips with this as an industry. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be the Wild West.
I wrote after Jordan Addison went into the portal and maybe after he committed to USC, I wrote
started bidding at $1 million. $1 million.
Yeah, jump into the portal because, hey, it's not like Pittsburgh's going to say, no, you can't come back, kind of like when Carlos Boozer told the Cavs, yeah, just go ahead and make me a free agent. Don't worry, I'll come back. And then he left for bigger money to Utah. But what I wrote was, if coaches are going to complain, then name names. If you don't like players, recruits being induced with these NILs, start naming names. And because Pat Narduzzi was talking about before Jordan Addison went to the portal, I heard him on a radio show saying 12 different teams try to get Jordan Addison to leave via the portal. Name them. Name the teams, because if you're all going to be keeping this open secret, then you're just as guilty. Like, you're not an innocent player in this. If you know who are committing crimes, and you allow that to happen, then don't complain about it, because this is the filth that you work in. This is your existence. So don't work at the landfill and then complain every day when you come home with a dirty diaper on your shoes. This is, what did you expect? You work at the landfill. And so you have Nick Saban come out and say something, and then it completely blows up in his face. And so now I don't know that anybody's going to start talking anymore, because they saw how poorly, if it goes that poorly for Nick Saban, now he could have done it in a better way, and things can be done tactfully. But you also have to have the players willing to do this. Like if Jordan Addison had come out and said, these 6 teams contacted me, but I stuck with Pittsburgh. It's up to the players, I think, to get involved as well. And they're not necessarily going to want to do that. And even as the NCAA comes back and they're talking about, we're gonna find all these, we're gonna find inducements. Players aren't going to get punished, but schools will. That's not going to really get players to talk either, because we've seen how powerless the NCAA is. And even though they have rules and they say, well, we're going to enact them now, it's like, well, sure, as long as I tell you the truth, and you know what, I'm not gonna, I'm not willing to talk. Because if you're not going to punish the players, because that was what in the past you had to punish the players if they wouldn't talk, to get them to talk. And now if you go into this thing like, well, we're not looking to punish players, then why would they talk?
And we know the NCAA's first destination in trying to find something out, their quote unquote inquiry sent them to Miami. So whether that's coincidence or Miami fans will say that they are always the bad guys and the targets, then that we will see what comes of that.